And so this would be like this Michelangelo drawing that we had sell recently. It was a small drawing of a foot in a small piece of paper and sold for $27 million. You know,
Yeah.
it's sort of really, you know, there's a tremendous amount of demand when you can get it. But then there's also this other part where, you know, there's collectors that are going back in history and looking like who are the artists that we didn't talk about that were making work then. So, and a lot of this is the same dynamic we've seen with contemporary art of telling a much more broad story of what's going on. So who were women artists that we've never paid attention to that were making work, you know, 300 and 400 years ago? That's been a very fascinating side of the market that's actually given a little bit of growth to the market that wasn't there for a long time.
Yeah, really amazing. And so you talked about the auctions, but I think the same thing is kind of happening from the report in the dealer market as well, where it seems like it's a polarizing kind of world for dealers. The upper end seem to be doing very well. The lower end, or I hate to say lower, but moderate end seems to be doing really well. And then that middle seems to be challenged a little bit. Yeah. And maybe we even see that in some of the local cities here in the U.S. where some of those kind of mid-range galleries are not open anymore. So am I misreading that, or how did you see that part of the report?
No, it's true. And we've been talking about this for a while now. I mean, the galleries are tough businesses. You know, it's an expensive business to run. For galleries in that middle market segment where you're depending on selling works that are, say, $100,000 up to $250,000, somewhere in that range. You know, that's, for any collector, that's still, you know, an amount of money you're going to stop and think about, you know, spending that. And we've been in a market, and we're still in this market, where collectors have a little bit, they can be a little more choosy about what they do. And so if you need to make sales month to month out of your exhibitions to satisfy your operating costs as a gallery, that's hard. That's a tough environment. Now for galleries that, as you rightly pointed out, on the higher end of that, or who have a more substantial bank of inventory, it's higher value, maybe a deeper collector base, they can weather that storm a little bit, you know. And for, you know, the newer entrants to the market, you know, what we call the emerging market galleries, maybe they're not as sort of obsessed with making money yet. You know, they're doing it for the love of the game. They want to experiment some, you know, and see kind of what new ideas they can exhibit. And for those, it is interesting to see like what's coming along in that area. But that middle part has been tough. I mean, I think that in this moment, when you look at the data, we returned to growth overall. So the headline number increased 4% year over year from last year. But most of that growth happened on the auction side. So the auctions, really the pain hit them first, starting in 2023 with the slowdown in the market, and they had to get nimble. They changed their business practices, they made tough decisions about hiring and staffing, and it's started to work. We've started to see this sort of turnaround in their businesses. They're doing better. The galleries, that wave came really on the second part.